Acts chapter 21, starting in verse 27. And when the 7 days were almost over, the Jews from Asia, upon seeing him in the temple, began to stir up all the multitude and laid hands on him. Actually, I probably should do it through to a sentence at least. Lands on him, crying out, this is 28, Men of Israel, come to our aid. This is the man who preaches to all men everywhere against our people and the law and this place. And besides, he has even brought Greeks into the temple, and he has defiled this holy place. I'll stop there, those two. So what's been happening here is Paul has made it to Jerusalem for Pentecost, and he has prepared himself spiritually to observe the festival that is going on here. In 26, as a remembrance, 26 says, Then Paul took the men, this is that oath that they were going to do, purifying himself among them, went into the temple, giving notification of the completion of the days of purification until the sacrifice was offered for each one of them. So that's what this in 27, and when the 7 days were almost over here.
What was that?
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
I was going to figure out how to shut the thing off.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
What was the significance of the 7 days? Is that the festival?
No, he was saying that was that, you remember they took that Nazarene oath? Just
Yeah, was
before-
that a 7-day oath? That's what I can
Yes.
remember. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
What was I heading with? So this purification thing. Why do this purification thing? What's the deal about them doing a purification?
That's the Nazarenes, not
Right.
Paul.
But Paul is doing it amongst this, and it's part of this ritual that they do. But why do they need to be purified? Maybe the question I should be asking is purified from what?
Yeah.
Well, it probably not purified from something, but purified to something.
To something? Okay.
Yeah. Or set aside, or
Set aside.
sanctified may even
Sanctified,
be a
maybe?
better word.
Yeah.
So
You know,
one of the commentators made an interesting point is that people who were traveling into Jerusalem, they had to travel through non-Jewish lands.
Right.
So the moment they stepped into non-Jewish lands, they were defiled.
Yeah.
They were unclean. And in order to go to the temple, they had to clean themselves. Because even the dirt of the Gentiles was sinful. If I
There's
could
other things like touching a dead animal.
Yes.
Or,
Yeah.
right,
You
just
know, a lot of
walking the
things that-
same place and stepping on the same thing that a Gentile stepped on.
Yeah.
You got to realize the separation of the two. I mean, it was massive. We probably have a whole lot more tolerance for a lot of that than in our lives, but back then, no, it was you just did not mix at all, type thing. So that's most likely where one commentator says that's where most likely this purification started its roots from. Is from that need to have a purification.
But didn't they have to shave their heads, and there was a number
And there were
of
other
too
things,
for this
yes.
particular
Yes.
vow?
And so towards what Mickey's point is about being purified to, or to be sanctified to, is the external cleansing, the shaving of the heads and all that other stuff. To also say, see, I am purified. It's more than just
Well, I
an
think
internal thing.
Also, they had a lot of traditions, like you were mentioning about cleansing yourself, leaving
Yeah.
Gentile land and all that.
Yeah.
But they're saying, all right, now we're going to have a separate vow or thing we're going to do. We have to do something over and above to stand out.
Yes.
And in those days, everything was sacrifices, sacrificial. Sacrifice of lamb, sacrifice of dove, you do all these things. So I think the idea is that you had all these things that we would consider extreme now, but that's their daily life.
Yes.
So to do something even more, you got to shave, you got to cut off your left pinky or whatever. There's all these things that they had to do to say, look, I'm special.
Right.
or I'm doing something special or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, you just look at the most, I mean, when you're asking a grown man to be circumcised to show, I mean, you don't talk about, that's about as extreme as you can get,
Yeah.
right? And so all of those things were done, that was all part of just the culture and the tradition of what they did. You know, I mean, we had religions that carried that out even, into the, centuries after this.
Yeah.
You know, people that would flagellate themselves and things like that to show that they were.
And hair was a big deal for them too. I don't know, at least
The beards.
The Jews that I know nothing about this, have the curls, whatever they call those ringlet things on the side, and the beard. And I don't know about the hair, but there's a lot into that.
Yes.
And I've always heard, at least in the modern terms, that if you shave Hasidic Jews, is that what it's called, the ones that have all that?
Yes, the Hasidic.
If you shave them or cut off their curls, that is
Yeah.
a major, major deal for them.
If you remember David's men, that they went in and got defeated or got run off, and one of the things when they captured them, they shaved their heads and shaved their, or I don't know if they fully shaved their beard, but they kind of cut them off to where, and then David held them out from going back into the city until their hair had grown back and their beards had grown back. It was just
It was a big deal, and here they said shaved, I don't know if they mentioned beards.
I don't know.
I don't know
I
nothing
don't
about
know.
it.
But it's a big deal, is my point,
Yes.
more than just a haircut.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Very much so. Okay, so in the 27, the intro is, and when the 7 days were almost over, and here's the point of it, the Jews from Asia, upon seeing him. So who are these Jews from Asia? Technically Asia Minor.
Where are they right now?
Well, they're in Jerusalem.
Okay, that's right.
So there's some Jews from Asia Minor. Do you know where Asia Minor, or one of the major cities is? Ephesus.
Oh, okay.
And remember where Paul was when Ephesus and all the hoopla, if I may say, was happening. So, as we've been going through the chapters, Paul seems to have always been being chased by these Jews. It's like they're after him. So they're the posse, right? Or looking for Paul all the time. So you get to this point, and there's these Jews again from Ephesus, and they are starting to do an accusation, and now they're at their home base here. Upon seeing him in the temple, began to stir up all the multitude and laid hands on them. So that mine has stirred up. Is that it?
Stirred up, yeah.
Stirred? Everybody's got stirred? As in and my visual is like a witch's cauldron. You know, you're just stirring it up. You're spreading those rumors. I hear that they did this. You know, that kind of stuff. With no fact, just that they accuse. And they were crying out what? This men of Israel. So they're yelling at them, come to our aid. This is the man who preaches to all men everywhere against our people. Where was it? And besides, he has brought Greeks into the temple and has defiled the holy place. So, as a reminder of the layout of the temple area, almost kind of, it's not really a concentric circles, but there's an area reserved for the absolute most high Jews, the high Jews, the women Jews.
Well, it's off to the side, but yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That's what I meant. It's not a concentric circle, but it's kind of a barrier up to the place where anybody can go to.
Right.
And as I understand it from some descriptions, they actually had kind of like a fence in those areas, and written on top of the fence was a statement that says, if you try to get into the Jewish part, that says, you enter this at your own risk because we will kill you. You know, I'm paraphrasing, but that's the wording of it.
Okay.
So much so, even the Roman guards, the Roman soldiers, will not go into that area.
Oh, really?
That is a concession that the Jewish nation had, that the temple police could do what they wanted to do. And in that sign it says, and they will dispatch justice as they need to. I think it's adjudicate, which AKA kill you, is what that is. And that was the only place that was allowed by the Romans, is that.
Okay,
So,
so they could actually,
right then and there.
okay, I understand the temple police and the separation of Causeway police, kind of what we're talking about. You know, when they have control or whatever you want to call it inside, I didn't realize they had the authority to kill someone.
They have the enforcement ability, yes, to do that.
Hmm.
So in that area, so that's kind of is why they were asking for the help here, is to get these men here. And the accusation is that he's even brought the Greeks into the temple. And we'll see in just a few seconds here. 29, for they had, and this is the explanation, for they had previously seen Trophimus, the Ephesian in the city with him, and they supposed that Paul had brought him into the temple. So earlier they saw this Greek, okay, this non-Jew with Paul, and so they just said, oh, if he's with Paul, and now Paul's in the temple area, where all the Jews are at, obviously he brought him in, and he defiled the place. And so we're all ruined, is what they're trying to stir up here. They suppose that Paul brought him. 30, and all the city was aroused, and the people rushed together, taking hold of Paul. They dragged him out of the temple, and immediately the doors were shut. Okay, so taking him out, imagine the picture of them grabbing him out. And then why shut the door?
That's what you do when you throw somebody out. You slam the door in the face.
You slam the door in the face.
That's what I'm envisioning.
Also, this should have been handled as an internal matter to the temple with the temple leadership, but obviously that wouldn't have gone the way the mob wanted to go.
Right.
So you pull him out and you make a big stir for the Romans to handle. You've got a lot better control in the outcome of that going the way you want it to.
You want the bigger the riot, the better the riot. Kind of thing.
And instead of going over to Peter or somebody and like, hey, this is what's going on, or whoever's there now.
But James.
James. They're like, hey, what's going on with this? They stirred everybody up. They caused a big ruckus, and they drug him out as an angry mob, where he is now subject to punishment from on the Roman side.
Right.
Well, I'm wondering if part of this was kind of like what they did to Jesus was, we can't do the temple guard business with him because we don't have enough evidence. But if we throw him out there, maybe he'll get in a kangaroo court and get punished for disturbing the peace, so to speak.
Right. I mean, obviously the temple guard did not find the Greek. Didn't see Paul bring him
They
into
didn't
the
have hard
temple.
evidence to say.
Right. You don't have that.
Yeah.
So the temple guard, I mean, regardless, is not stirred up by the riot. Right. They're going to adjudicate based on evidence that they have.
You think, yeah.
One would think. So what do? They get the crowd to get out of the people who would actually do the job. You know. Here. Okay.
Glad that kind of stuff doesn't happen today.
Yeah, I keep thinking so many parallels in this. It's amazing. Let's see, 30. The doors were shut. So a lot of it. One commentator that I read mentioned that shutting the door would help prevent any more violation. Is what they were trying to do. They were trying to show the sign of it's so bad we need to close the doors because all the Greeks are coming in. You know, we're being inundated, we're being overrun. Right. You know, that kind of a thing. Here. 31. And while they were seeking to kill him being Paul, okay, a report came up to the commander of the Roman cohort that all Jerusalem was in confusion. And we've talked about this before. What is the problem with all of Jerusalem being in confusion, aka riot, aka a scene?
Well, the Rome just wanted them to handle their business quietly and just stay subservient and out of the way.
Right. Is the one thing you don't want is a riot. Is keep the peace at all costs. Is what that is. 32, right? Yep. Wait a minute. Yeah, in confusion. 32. And at once he took along some soldiers and centurions and ran down to them And when they saw the commander and the soldiers, they stopped beating Paul. So,
Actually saved Paul.
yeah, exactly.
If you want to,
Yeah, it's Paul wasn't just being handled, right? He was being beaten. I can just imagine by this time probably Paul was down on the ground, you know, and it's kicking time, you know, kind of seems to be the favorite.
what's interesting is that they weren't officially, I don't know if executing is the right word, because they had ways of doing that. Stoning, for instance, and there's other, I can't remember the other ones offhand, but stoning was a common practice. But basically, they put you in the middle and everybody threw rocks at you.
Mhm.
And that was an official form of punishment, even to the death.
Right.
But that's an official proclamation. You will stone him to death. Everybody pick up a rock. Where this is the officials, the Pharisees or whatever you want to call them, temple officials, could claim, hey, we had nothing to do with it.
Yeah, I think it's one of those official official unofficial beatings,
Right,
you know,
right.
or punishments kind of thing.
Because remember what we talked about, especially at the time with Jesus, was that the Jews couldn't execute anybody
Right.
at that time.
That's why I was confused
Even though
about
they
inside
had
the
they had the
temple.
right to be able to stone people, that the Romans basically tell them you can't.
Right.
That's why they brought Jesus to Pontius Pilate. You know,
Mhm.
because actually they could have stoned him if they had true evidence against him for blasphemy, but they couldn't because the Romans wouldn't allow them to at that time. The Romans were the only ones that could execute.
I think that's why they're saying here, where this is just some people fighting.
They threw him out the temple and let everybody beat him up.
Right.
That's basically what they did.
Food to the dogs.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
33, then the commander came up and took hold of him and ordered him to be bound with 2 chains. I suppose just 1 chain. And he began asking who was and what had he done. So, you know, so here's this commander trying to take control of the situation, right? 34, but among the crowd some were shouting one thing and some another, and when he could not find out the fact, on account of the uproar, he ordered him to be brought into the barracks. So, saving Paul out of this, getting him out of the sight,
Yeah.
out of the crowd here. It's funny that they couldn't figure out the facts, right? Probably because there was no real facts, but that's the thing. He certainly didn't have any certainty. 35, when he got to the stairs, it so happened that he was carried by the soldiers because of the violence of the mob. So what condition was Paul in?
Bad enough he couldn't walk.
Yeah, exactly. For the multitude of the people kept following behind, crying out, away with him.
When he first got there, just looking back at verses 17 through 19, things were going good for a short while. The report of Paul and what he'd been doing was received well.
Right.
Yeah.
Things had turned
Yeah.
at this point.
Of course, the audience in 17 and on was fellow Christians
Right.
here. But you're right. I mean, there's a world of difference of reception here. World of difference here. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
But it's interesting to say away with him as opposed to kill him or crucify him and yeah, I don't know what the real translation is of that.
Mine
It
says
just
the way
says
it's
basically
written.
throw him out of town or
Yeah.
tar and feather him and sit him on the rail.
I just presumed that they meant make Roman punishment, get it, you know, basically kill
Could
him.
be, I don't know. It's interesting.
On it. I'm sure if nothing else, that would be the great desired outcome.
Certainly by those people who
Yeah.
age of honor.
Exactly, yeah. 37, and as Paul was about to be brought into the barracks, he said to the commander, "May I say something to you?" And he said, "Do you know Greek?"
Is that Paul that said, do you know Greek?
No,
Oh.
that's the commander
Commander, okay.
that got taken aback because he thought it was just
Hmm.
a bunch of Jews doing
I see. Good things.
Jew things on Jews and, an internal matter, if you will. And then he's been forced into taking care of the situation. So he was assuming, and there's assumption coming, let's go ahead and read that assumption real quick. 38. At the end of 37 it says, do you know Greek? 38. Then you are not the Egyptian who some time ago stirred up a revolt and led the 4,000 men of the assassins out into the wilderness? A little background right there. What's going on? So first of all, the commander was presuming that Paul was this assassin, the leader of the assassins, as a matter of fact. So who are these guys? Remember?
Are those the Zealots?
Yeah. Yeah. So there,
What did he say?
zealots.
Zealots.
Zealots. So there was a group of men, and this was also recorded by that historian Josephus.
Josephus.
Yeah. Although Josephus said that it was 30,000. Apparently, one of the commentators says Josephus was known to exaggerate a little with it. But the commander said 4,000, so we'll go with 4,000. And there was a large contingent of men that had gone out in the wilderness and became basically a militia unto themselves. But they were assassins to kill and overthrow the government, and particularly, well, this had happened just a few years prior to this. And they were known assassins that carried a little dagger. And so they would go into the crowds, and then they would assassinate right then and there, in the crowds, in the mix. And they'd cause a riot so that all the leaders and everyone would be coming out. So then they could do their assassin thing.
It didn't slip out.
And then slip out. Apparently, most of these assassins were captured and killed, a majority of them, except for the leader was not found. And so that's why this commander's making this presumption that here we go again, here's the technique. Build up the crowd, get everyone all stirred up, and so the assassins can come and kill. So that's where the commander's point of view is. He's coming from that direction, a resurrection, an insurrection about to happen here. Insurrection, not resurrection. That's the difference. Okay? And so that's the background of this here. Stirred up a revolt and led the 4,000 men of assassins out of the wilderness. But Paul said, I am a Jew of Tarsus in Cilicia, a citizen of no significant city, and I beg you, allow me to speak to the people. So Paul is being carried. He's been whooped upon, bad enough where he has to be picked up and carried. And his first thing is he wants to go and have
He sees
an
an opportunity.
opportunity to preach. Right here.
Everybody's looking this way, hey.
Exactly. And 40. And when he had given him permission, Paul, standing on the stairs, motioned to the people with his hand. And when there was a great hush, he spoke to them in Hebrew dialect, saying, next chapter.
Tune in next week.
Tune in next week.
Cliffhanger.
It makes you wonder what size of this crowd are we talking about? Are we talking about like 20 people? Or are we talking about like 500 or more? Because
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like it's pretty easy to get a medium-sized group stirred up and whatnot. But if it gets to be too big, I mean, there's got to be people that have no idea what's going on. They're just following what
Oh, I
the crowd's
guarantee you
going
that,
on.
Yeah.
They see entertainment, they come out and join. That's the whole thing of
Yeah.
the riot.
Yeah.
But how do you hush a huge crowd, though? More than 20 people.
Well,
Paul did that often though.
yeah.
This is something we see, that whole thing with, he motioned with his hand. We see that in a lot of his, especially his first missionary journey,
Yeah.
when he would go.
Like the Rompucus,
Yes.
whatever you call it.
Yeah.
Sort
But I've thought,
Obi-Wan Kenobi or something.
Yeah.
no, I've often thought about this, in other areas, they didn't have megaphones and all these other things. So, they're used to people, whether it's the Pope, whether it's nowadays you have the balcony, but they would come out and speak to the people. And yeah, a lot of things were built with acoustics in mind, but you still didn't have everything in an amphitheater. So they're used to getting news. The town crier will stand up on the whatever. So I would think that it's, shut up, I'm listening. I want to hear. as opposed to, what did he just say? You know, you would think that they were trained, if you will, to be quiet and try to hear everything. They'll talk about it afterwards, I'm assuming.
Well, the amazing thing about this is these are the ones that were basically shouting him down. And now all of a sudden, he's gonna be quiet. Now,
True.
don't want to go to spooky natural stuff, but does this motioning of the hand thing, I mean, this is an act of God, that this whole thing happened like this, right?
Yeah.
So is this motioning of the hand thing, is it, you know, what is that? Is that just a gesture? Is it something that basically, you know, Paul does? I don't know. But obviously he did it quite often, and obviously when he did it, something happened. So, you know, whatever that is. But this had to be an act of God to where these people that were beating him and chasing them away so much that they had to grab Paul, put him on their shoulders and start carrying him up the stairs, are now going to sit and listen to him and be quiet.
Yeah.
So there was something supernatural
Maybe kind of
that
a
happened.
force, you know, but
Yes, yeah.
I'm joking, but it.
No,
But
but-
you're right.
Could
I
have been
mean-
something like that, right? So back to your question of how big that crowd is, big enough that the commander had to get involved.
Yeah.
True.
So,
With centurions. And
right,
Centurions, they control 100 men, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So there may not have been 100 men with them, but that's the status of the people who went to go get them.
These are well-armed,
Yeah.
SWAT team guys, you know, so to speak.
And you gotta think about that response time. It's not like it is today where within 5 minutes you get cops there.
right.
This is, figure, I don't know, at least 20 people moving your way. That's a long time to get your butt kicked.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, a long time. I don't know, today, in today's thing, would we have a Paul that could do something like that? I mean, do we now have the tendency in our lives and in our society of well, we want to spread the gospel, but we want to do it as safely as possible. We want, out of an abundance of caution, we'll back off or whatever that we do. It just makes me wonder why we don't have this fervency for sharing the gospel as Paul did. I don't think it's necessarily because Paul had a special status or anything. I think our culture has taught us to play it safe. Now, that's an accusation on me more than it is on an accusation on anything else.
Well, I think we're paralyzed by data nowadays. There's so much, I mean, these days you didn't have the internet and newspapers and everything else, so everything was verbal. There was some written stuff, but the masses generally got their stuff verbally. And you didn't have the distractions you have nowadays. I think we now have these influencers or whatever they call them, you know, through the phone and everything else that are just demanding our attention. So we put everything into the noise category, including if there was someone like Paul doing this, it'd just be noise like all the other garbage we hear on a daily basis. This way, in my opinion, that's because I ignore so much stuff that some of it may be true, a lot of it may be true.
I think we don't see what happens outside of the United States.
Yeah.
What happens in other countries. I know for certain that there are evangelists that go into third world countries
There are.
that do massive revivals, if you want to say,
Right.
to tens of thousands of people, where thousands and thousands of people get saved on a regular basis. And I think we don't see it here.
Right.
But I think those are kind of like the modern day Pauls, where they'll go, you know, into those areas and are able to preach. I think we've just been so, well, first of all, I think the United States, our culture now, I mean, compared to, let's say, Billy Graham, when Billy Graham started, we are so far
From that.
you know, to where people even will accept that message, you know. But I think we just we look at it in such a localized area, you know.
Look at what happened, I don't remember the names, the ones during COVID, that group or since COVID, and what was it, Texas or Illinois, where they had that revival, it just was supposed to be a week and ended up going for 3 months, or whatever it was. You know what I'm talking about, I can't remember the name of it. So it is happening
Yeah.
in some cases.
Yes.
I think we also don't have the urgency that that they had back then, where you may only have one chance to share the gospel with somebody. We kind of played the long game, like, oh, well, maybe if we keep this relationship going for 5, 10, 20 years, eventually they'll come. There's no sense of tomorrow in this. It is immediate. That might be because of the persecution of the Christians at the time, and the fact that they were not in even in a political position to have dominion over their areas. The only thing that the Jews had was, the temple, and everything else under Roman control also. And then the Jews were the ones persecuting the Christians. So the urgency that they have, we just don't have that perspective at all right now.
So we're more worried about possibly offending or embarrassing ourselves than the actual soul that we're talking to.
It's quite an indictment.
It is quite an indictment.
Yeah.
Worried about being canceled.
Right, worried about that canceling. Wow.
Or even worry about just being looked bad about.
Look, right,
Yeah.
exactly. Just having some kind of reputation that,
You know?
oh, there's that hour, yeah,
Right.
that kind of, yeah. Wow. Okay.
The Jews had so much information about the Lord with the temple and everything, so that when they addressed the Jews, a lot of times the Jews understood what they were talking about because of their background. But when Paul would go where Gentiles were, and they didn't have that background, he'd have to kind of start with the foundation, tell them, and build up to the gospel message, so they'd understand. And if he said God, they think of 100 gods.
Right.
What God are you talking about? So
Right.
he'd have to.
Drill down.
You know.
Yeah. Right. And we'll find in 22, Paul does not start off that way.
Yeah.
He does it by personal testimony, what God did for him. We're going to see that in 22. We really need to stop here, really, honestly. Really, we have to stop. What are you guys praying for?